The sun was only beginning to rise over the small fishing town of Carigara, painting the horizon in soft shades of gold and pink. The tide whispered gently against the worn wooden boats, and the salty breeze carried the scent of the sea, fresh, alive, eternal. Somewhere along the shore, a boy's voice floated above the morning hum of life, rich and deep, smooth yet strong. It was the voice of Mateo Cruz, a 14-year-old boy with skin tanned by the sun and eyes that seemed far older than his years. He sat on a pile of fishing nets beside his father, humming softly as his fingers worked through the tangled cords. Wise men say. He sang under his breath, his tone both wistful and hauntingly beautiful. His father looked up from his work, pausing to listen. Your voice, Hijo, he said with a quiet smile. It always makes this old sea sound sweeter. Mateo smiled shyly. He wasn't used to compliments. For as long as he could remember, he'd sung not to impress anyone, but to remember someone. The person who had taught him what music meant. That person was Lolo Ben, his grandfather. When Mateo was just a little boy, his grandfather used to sit on the bamboo porch every evening with an old transistor radio that crackled with static. He'd tune into stations that played classics from another era, songs by Elvis Presley, the Beatles and Frank Sinatra. But it was Elvis who truly captured their hearts. Lolo Ben would lean back, close his eyes, and say, "Listen to that, Mateo. That's a man who sings from the soul. You can't fake that kind of truth." Back then, Mateo didn't fully understand what his grandfather meant. But he could feel it. Whenever Elvis sang, something stirred inside him. Something warm and aching. Like a memory he hadn't lived but somehow knew. He began to imitate that voice. At first it was play. He'd puff out his chest, curl his lip, and say, "Thank you. Thank you very much," just to make his grandfather laugh. But soon, the imitation became instinct. The more he sang, the more people stopped to listen. Even the village elders would pause from their work to watch the boy by the shore. Fishermen returning from sea would lean against their boats, captivated. Women carrying baskets of rice would whisper, "He sounds like Elvis himself." To Mateo, it was never about imitation. It was about connection. Every note he sang was a thread, tying him to the memory of his grandfather, to the love that had shaped his life. When Lolo Ben fell ill, the house by the sea grew quiet. The laughter, the music, the crackling radio, all of it faded beneath the sound of labored breathing. Mateo would sit beside his bed, holding his hand, and softly sing the songs his grandfather once loved. "Take my hand, take my whole life too." One night, as the rain fell outside and the sea roared in the distance, his grandfather whispered, "Mateo, promise me something." Mateo leaned close. "Yes, Lolo, don't ever stop singing. One day, the world will hear your voice. And when they do, I'll be right there, listening." Those were the last words his grandfather ever spoke. After the funeral, Mateo would go down to the shore every dawn, sit where the water met the sand, and sing to the waves. The songs became his prayer, his way of talking to the man he missed most. The town learned to start their mornings with his voice. Shopkeepers opening their stalls, children walking to school, and fishermen pushing off from the beach would all pause for a moment, listening to the music drifting through the breeze. It was as if Elvis himself had found his way back to life through this quiet Filipino boy. But while others saw talent, Mateo only saw memory. He didn't dream of fame or fortune. Those things felt too distant, too unreal. His dream was simple: to keep his grandfather's promise alive. Still, there were moments when he wondered what it would be like, just once, to sing on a real stage before a real audience. Sometimes, when the sky turned violet and the waves were calm, he'd close his eyes and imagine standing in front of thousands, singing the same song his grandfather loved most. He could almost hear the applause, almost see the bright lights, almost feel the warmth of his grandfather's hand on his shoulder. But then the wind would shift, and he'd open his eyes to the same old shoreline, the same small fishing town. Dreams like that, he told himself, belonged to people far away, people with money, connections, opportunities. Not to boys like him. Yet destiny has a way of finding those who least expect it. One evening, while Mateo was singing by the shore, a group of tourists passed by, drawn by his voice. One of them, began woman from Los Angeles, stopped and began recording on her phone. She didn't say anything, just listened, tears welling up in her eyes as he sang the last line. "I can't help falling in love with you." When he finished, she approached him, still amazed. "That was incredible," she said. "What's your name?" "Mil," he replied shyly. "You sound like Elvis." She laughed. Like he's come back to life through you. He just smiled. My grandfather loved him. I just sing for him. The woman posted the video online that night with the caption, "The Filipino boy who sings Elvis better than Elvis." By morning, it had tens of thousands of views. By the end of the week it had millions. Mateo didn't even know until a neighbor showed him on her phone. There he was, barefoot. By the sea, his voice soaring across the world. He didn't know what was happening, only that his grandfather's promise suddenly felt closer than ever. The waves still whispered at his feet, but now, they seemed to carry something new, hope, rising with the tide. For the first time in his young life, Mateo dared to believe that maybe, just maybe his song could travel farther than the shore. And somewhere beyond the ocean, destiny was already listening. The morning air in Carigara felt different the day the email arrived. Mateo was mending nets with his father when his cousin Leah came running down the dirt road, waving her phone in the air and shouting, "Mateo, America's Got Talent messaged you." At first, he thought it was a joke. The idea seemed absurd. A boy from a quiet fishing village, barefoot most days, being noticed by one of the biggest talent shows in the world. Impossible. But when Leah shoved the phone in his hands, his eyes widened. There it was in clean black letters. "We saw your video. We'd love to invite you to audition for America's Talent in Los Angeles." For a long moment, Mateo just stared at the screen. The world seemed to tilt. The noise around him fading into the rush of the sea. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice whispering, "One day, the world will hear you." His father, Ernesto, stood beside him, wiping his hands on his worn shirt. "What does it say, Hijo?" Mateo handed him the phone, voice trembling. They want me to sing in America, Papa." The old fisherman blinked, as if trying to process what he just heard. Then a slow, proud smile spread across his face. "Your grandfather was right," he said softly. "The sea carried your song farther than we ever imagined. But dreams, even the brightest ones, come with shadows." The invitation was real, but so were the costs. The plane tickets alone were far beyond what they could afford. Ernesto's fishing boat, the family's only means of income, was already in poor shape. For days father and son sat in silence, staring out at the ocean. Mateo tried to pretend it didn't matter, that he was happy just to be invited. But deep down it hurt, to see a door open only to realize he couldn't walk through it. That night, as they ate dinner in the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, Ernesto cleared his throat. "Mateo," he said quietly, "I've been thinking." Mateo looked up from his bowl. "I'm going to sell the boat." The spoon froze in Mateo's hand. "Papa, no, that's how we live." Ernesto smiled sadly. "We can always build another boat. But opportunities like this," he shook his head, "they don't come twice." Mateo's eyes filled with tears. "But what if I fail?" Ernesto reached across the table and placed his calloused hand over his son's. "Then we fail together. But at least we'll know we tried. Your voice is our boat now. Let it carry us forward." Those words would stay with Mayo forever. Within 2 weeks, the small town gathered around to help. The mayor arranged a travel permit. The local priest gave his blessing. Neighbors donated what little they could, coins, food, even a small Philippine flag for him to carry. When the day of departure came, the whole village walked him to the bus stop. As the bus pulled away, Mateo pressed his forehead to the window, watching the faces fade behind the dust. His heart ached, but a quiet strength rose inside him. This wasn't just his journey. It belonged to everyone who had believed in him. The flight to Los Angeles was long and surreal. Mateo had never been on a plane before. The hum of the engines felt like the ocean's lullaby, steady and endless. He clutched his grandfather's old rosary in one hand and stared out at the clouds, whispering prayers under his breath. When he finally stepped off the plane, the noise and brightness of the city hit him all at once. Skyscrapers towered like mountains, and the streets buzzed with energy. Everything was fast, people, cars, even the air felt different. The AGT staff met him at the airport, holding a sign with his name. They were kind, smiling and excited. "We've never had anyone go this viral before even arriving," one of them said. "You're already a fan favorite, Mateo." He smiled politely, but inside, he felt small, just a boy far from home, surrounded by lights and strangers. The night before the audition, Mateo and his father stayed in a modest hotel room. Ernesto sat by the window, looking out at the glowing city, while Mateo tuned a borrowed guitar. "Do you think Lolo's watching?" Mateo asked softly. Ernesto turned and nodded. "He's front row, Hijo." maybe even whispering in Simon Cowell's ear to be kind. They both laughed. Then silence filled the room again. The kind that hums with both fear and hope. The next morning came too soon. Backstage at the A2 studio, Matteo's hands trembled as he looked around. Performers from all over the world waited nervously. Some in costumes, some rehearsing lines. Cameras rolled, stage lights glared, he'd never seen anything like it. An assistant handed him a number tag. "You'll go on in 20 minutes, she said with a reassuring smile. 20 minutes, he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to hum softly. The melody steadied him. It reminded him of the sea of home, of his grandfather's voice on those warm, simple evenings. Then came the announcement. Next up, Mateo Cruz, from the Philippines. He stepped into the blinding light of the stage. The crowd was massive, hundreds of faces, thousands of unseen eyes. He could feel the weight of them, the noise of expectation pressing in on him. Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Howie Mandel, and Heidi Klum sat before him at the judges' table. Simon leaned forward slightly, his signature half-curious, half-skeptical look in place. "What's your name?" Simon asked. "My name is Mateo Cruz," he said, his accent soft but clear. "And where are you from?" "I'm from the Philippines, sir." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Simon nodded. "And what will you be singing for us today?" Mateo clutched his rosary tighter. "I'll be singing Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley." Simon raised an eyebrow. "That's a big song. Good luck." Mateo nodded. "Thank you." The music began, gentle, familiar. He closed his eyes and let the first note rise from somewhere deep within, from a place filled with memories of waves, nets, laughter, and loss. For a moment, a massive hall disappeared. There was no stage, no judges, no crowd, only him, his grandfather's voice echoing through time. And the song that bound them. When he opened his eyes again, he saw that the audience had fallen utterly still. Even Simon's expression had softened. The lights seemed to glow warmer. And as the final note lingered in the air, something inside Mateo told him this was the beginning of something far bigger than he'd ever dreamed. He wasn't just a boy from a fishing town anymore. He was a bridge between worlds. The living and the gone, the simple and the grand, the small and the infinite. And in that moment, as the crowd erupted into applause, Mateo looked upward and whispered, "We made it." Low, the lights dimmed, the music began, and for a heartbeat, there was only silence, thick, expectant silence. Then, a single note drifted into the air. Low, tender, fragile as a whisper. Wise men say only fools rush in. The sound didn't just fill the theater, it touched it. It was as if every molecule of air trembled in recognition. Mateo's voice, rich and soul-stirring, didn't belong to a boy of 14. It carried decades of longing, wisdom, and warmth. As though he had lived 100 lives before this one. People in the audience blinked, confused for a moment, searching for what they were hearing. Some leaned forward, some forgot to breathe. Simon Cowell, usually the first to raise an eyebrow or smirk skeptically, simply stared. His pen slipped from his hand and clattered to the table, unnoticed. Sofia Vergara mouthed the words, "Oh my God," as goosebumps rose on her arms. Even the backstage crew stopped moving, frozen where they stood. One of the camera operators whispered to another, This doesn't sound real." But it was real. It was Mateo, barefoot on one of the grandest stages in the world, clutching a microphone like it was a lifeline. Eyes half closed as his voice poured out every ounce of love and loss that had shaped his young life. The first verse flowed effortlessly. "But I can't help falling in love with you." He didn't sing it like an imitation of Elvis. He sang it like a prayer. Like he was singing to someone. For someone. Each note shimmered with sincerity, pure, untouched by ego or fame. And as he reached the chorus, something in the air shifted. People weren't just listening anymore, they were feeling. In the front row, an elderly woman pressed her hand over her heart. She had come to the show with her granddaughter, expecting a night of laughs and spectacle. But now, tears welled in her eyes. "It's like he's singing to my husband," she whispered. He loved this song. All around her, others nodded silently, some crying, some smiling through the ache of memory. Mateo continued, his voice growing steadier, fuller, "Take my hand, take my whole life too." With every word, he seemed to lift the audience higher, as though carrying them on the same dream he once shared with his grandfather by the sea. And in that dream, there was no fame, no competition, just connection. He sang for the fishermen back home who rose before dawn. He sang for the mothers who prayed over dinner tables. He sang for his father. Sitting just backstage, eyes glistening as he whispered a prayer. And above all, he sang for Lolo Ben, the man who had believed in him first. The giant screen behind him flickered softly with the golden lights of the stage, but in his mind, he saw the glow of the Philippine sunrise instead. He saw his grandfather's wrinkled hand beat, smiling that quiet smile of pride. When the song reached its final line, Mateo let the last note linger. For I can't help falling in love with you. It hung in the air, trembling alive. Then, silence again. Not the kind of silence that comes from disinterest or confusion. No, this was the silence of awe. The kind that happens when words fail, when hearts are too full to speak. For nearly 3 seconds, no one moved, not a whisper, not a breath. And then, like a wave crashing to shore, the theater erupted. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause was deafening, rolling through the room like thunder. People clapped, cheered, whistled, some shouting, "Encore!" and "Go, Mateo!" Even Simon Cowell, whose compliments were rare and precious, stood up, eyes shining. He didn't look like a judge anymore. He looked like someone who just remembered why music mattered. Sophia was wiping her tears openly. "You made me cry." She laughed through the emotion. "You're so young, but you sing with such soul. It's unbelievable." Howie Mandel shook his head in amazement. "You know what's crazy?" he said. "You didn't just sing an Elvis song, you became the message behind it. I've never heard anything like that in my life." Heidi smiled gently, her voice warm and trembling. "When you started singing, I saw everyone stop like time froze. That's when I knew this wasn't just a performance. It was something spiritual." Finally, Simon spoke. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, was unusually soft. "Mateo," he said, leaning forward. "I've heard thousands of people sing Elvis. I've seen tribute acts, impressionists, even legends. But I've never heard anyone channel it the way you just did." The crowd roared again, chanting his name. "Mateo! Mateo!" Mateo stood there, overwhelmed, his small hands trembling around the microphone. Tears welled in his eyes, but he tried to smile. He didn't know what to say, so he bowed deeply, a gesture his grandfather had taught him, to show gratitude beyond words. The camera zoomed in on Simon, who glanced toward the golden buzzer. He hesitated, fingers hovering over it, the audience beginning to cheer louder, sensing what might come next. But instead, Simon looked up and said, "I want to hear his story first." The lights softened. The host, Terry Crews, walked on stage, his towering presence gentle and kind. He put a hand on Mateo's shoulder. "Mateo," he said, "that was magical. Tell us who inspired you to sing like that." Mateo swallowed hard, blinking through the blur of tears. "My grandfather," he said softly. "Hey, he loved Elvis. We used to listen to him every night on a small radio. He said one day the world would hear me sing." The audience went silent again. "He passed away 2 years ago," Mateo continued, voice trembling. "And I promised him that I would keep singing. So tonight I sang for him." A collective sigh spread through the room. You could feel it, the shared emotion. The empathy that tied everyone in that moment together. Simon nodded slowly. "Well," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I think he heard you tonight." And then, with one firm motion, he reached forward. The golden buzzer lit up the entire room. Confetti exploded from the ceiling, showering the stage in gold. The music swelled. The audience screamed with joy. Mateo gasped, covering his mouth in disbelief. His father rushed out from backstage, tears streaming down his face, and pulled his son into his arms. Simon stood clapping with genuine admiration. "You didn't just sing Elvis," he said over the noise. "You reminded us why Elvis mattered. You reminded us why music matters." Mateo clung to his father, sobbing, the confetti sticking to his hair, the lights blurring through his tears. Somewhere deep inside he whispered, "We did it, Lolo, we really did it." And in that vast theater, as golden sparkles rained down and strangers cried for a boy from a faraway shore, the world felt a little smaller. A little kinder. A little more human. Backstage after the performance, the noise of celebration still thundered through the walls. Confetti clung to Mateo's hair and shirt, as he sat on a small chair near the dressing room, his hands trembling around a cup of water he hadn't yet managed to drink. He could still hear the echo of the crowd chanting his name. "Mateo!" Like a dream he wasn't sure he had really lived. The golden confetti glimmered on his palms, and he stared at it as though it were stardust, fragile and unbelievable. His father, Ernesto, sat beside him, silent but smiling. The lines on his weathered face seemed softer, younger somehow, as if pride had erased years of hardship. "You did it, Hijo," he said finally, his voice breaking. "You made the whole world listen." Mateo looked up, eyes still wide. "I didn't think they'd stand. Or that Simon would." Ernesto laughed gently. A sound filled with both disbelief and joy. "Simon Cowell pressed that button for you. Do you know how rare that is?" "I just wanted to sing for Lolo," Mateo whispered. "And you did," his father said. "You sang for him, and for all of us." As the two embraced, the backstage doors opened and a crew member entered. "Mateo, the judges would like to speak with you for a quick interview," she said, smiling warmly. Mateo wiped his tears quickly and nodded. His legs still shook as he stood. The hallway leading back to the stage felt endless, lined with lights and posters of past winners, icons, legends, people he'd only ever seen on TV. He felt small again. Like a boy standing on the shore watching a ship pass by. But as he walked, his father's words echoed in his heart. "Your voice is our boat now." When he stepped into the interview room, the atmosphere was softer, no stage lights this time, no roar of applause. Just the judges seated on a couch, smiling, relaxed. Simon stood up first and walked toward him, something rare in itself. "Mateo," Simon said, his tone gentle. "That was one of the most beautiful performances we've ever had on this stage." Mateo bowed instinctively, his Filipino manners taking over. "Thank you, sir," Simon smiled, almost fatherly. "You know, when you started singing I thought, here comes another Elvis tribute. But then I realized you weren't copying him. You were him, his spirit, his sincerity. How does a 14-year-old sing with that kind of soul?" Mateo looked down at his hands. "My grandfather," he said softly. "Hey, he used to tell me that music isn't about sounding perfect. It's about meaning every word." Sophia leaned forward, her expression tender. "Is he the one you mentioned on stage?" "Nkoned, yes, Mom. His name was Ben. We call him Lolo Ben." He paused, taking a deep breath. His voice quivered, but he continued. "We lived by the sea. Every night, we listened to Elvis on an old radio. My Lolo said Elvis sang like he was talking to someone he loved who couldn't hear him anymore. When my Lolo got sick, I sang for him. It was the only way I knew how to make him smile." The room grew quiet. The hum of cameras, the shuffle of papers, all of it faded into stillness. Even Simon's expression softened further, his eyes glistening. Mateo's voice dropped to a whisper. "Before he passed away, he told me to promise I'd keep singing, that maybe one day, the world would hear me. So tonight I just wanted to keep that promise." Sophia wiped her tears, smiling through them. "You didn't just keep it, sweetheart, you fulfilled it." Heidi nodded, her voice warm and emotional. "And you reminded us what love sounds like when it's sung honestly. You could feel your grandfather in that song." Simon took a deep breath, folding his hands together as if choosing his words carefully. "Mateo," he said, "you need to understand something. We get thousands of auditions every year. Some people sing technically better, some perform bigger. But very few move people the way you just did. You made the audience cry, not because of the song, but because of the truth behind it." Mateo blinked rapidly, trying to process it. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Simon nodded. "You've got something special. Don't let anyone change that." Then he smiled, a rare, genuine one. "And for what it's worth, I think Elvis himself would have been proud." And Mateo's lips trembled, and he nodded. That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me." Just then, Terry Crews stepped into the room. "Mateo, the world's already reacting, my man," he said with a grin. "You're trending everywhere. Millions of views in minute yellins." Mateo's eyes widened. "But it just happened." Terry chuckled. "Yeah, that's what happens when something real hits the internet. People feel it." He turned toward Simon and the others. "The comments are unbelievable. People are saying things like, 'That boy healed my heart. And I haven't cried in years until now.'" Mateo covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. He never thought his voice, the same one that used to echo over quiet waves, could reach across oceans. Simon looked at him once more. "Mateo," he said softly. "What you did tonight wasn't just a performance. It was a gift. You reminded us of something we forget too easily. That music has the power to heal." As the judges stood to leave, Simon placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Keep singing like that, and you'll change lives." When they were gone, Mateo sat in the empty room for a moment, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked at the boy staring back, still in his simple clothes, hair messy from the confetti, eyes swollen from tears. He whispered quietly, "We did it, Lolo. You were right, they heard me." His father entered then, carrying a small folded towel. "You okay, son?" Amadeo nodded, though tears rolled down his cheeks again. I can't believe all this is happening." Ernesto smiled. "Believe it, you earned it, and somewhere up there, your Lolo is probably dancing to your song." They both laughed softly. Later that night in their hotel room, Mateo sat by the window overlooking the city lights. The streets below were alive with motion. Cars, people, dreams in motion. It reminded him of the sea back home, vast, unpredictable, full of stories. He picked up his guitar and began strumming softly. The same melody he'd sung on stage filled the room again, but quieter now, more intimate. Ernesto watched from the bed, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Still singing, huh?" Mateo looked up grinning. "I can't stop, Papa. Lolo wouldn't let me." And as he played, something beautiful happened. The noise of the city faded into harmony with his music, the hum of life blending with his quiet song. For the first time since his grandfather's passing, Mateo didn't feel like he was singing to heaven. He felt like he was singing with it. He didn't know what the future held, the semifinals, fame, or whatever else might come. But he knew one thing for certain: the boy from the small fishing town had brought his grandfather's dream to life. And maybe, just maybe, he had reminded the world that love never dies, it just finds a new voice. The morning after his audition, the sun rose over Los Angeles. But it wasn't just any sunrise, it felt brighter, softer, as felt the world itself had been moved by something pure. Overnight, Mateo's performance on America's Got Talent had gone viral. Clips of him singing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," flooded every social platform: Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Comments poured in by the millions. "That boy brought Elvis back with his heart," I cried. "Not because of the song, but because I felt something I haven't felt in years. Hope. Mateo, you reminded me of my dad. He loved Elvis too." "Thank you." In a matter of hours, a barefoot boy from a small fishing village of Philippines had become a symbol of love, resilience, and music's unbroken thread across generations. Meanwhile, in a modest Los Angeles hotel room, Mateo sat by the window with his father. The city glowed beneath them. Towering buildings, blinking lights, a world far from the salty breeze of home. Yet despite the noise and excitement outside, a quiet filled the room. Mateo held his grandfather's rosary in one hand and his phone in the other, scrolling through messages from people all over the world. "Papa," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They're saying I made them remember someone they loved." His father smiled softly. "You didn't just sing, Hijo. You made them feel. That's what your Lolo always said. Music isn't about the notes, it's about the soul behind them." Mateo nodded, blinking back tears. He could almost see his grandfather's wrinkled smile, his hands tapping along to the beat of an old Elvis tune played from their rusty radio. For the first time, Mateo didn't feel small or far from home. He felt like his song had become a bridge from the island shores to hearts around the world. Days later, when they returned to the Philippines, the entire town was waiting at the pier. Banners hung across bamboo fences. Children waved hand-painted signs, "Welcome home, Mateo," and "Our Elvis from the Sea." The same fishing nets that once trapped the ocean's bounty now framed the celebration. The air smelled of grilled fish and coconut smoke. Laughter and music filled the streets as the village gathered to welcome their hero. But for Mateo, it wasn't about the cheers or cameras. He looked toward the sea, the same sea where he once sang alone, and smiled. "Can we go there, Papa?" he asked, pointing to the old wooden dock. His father nodded. Together, they walked away from the crowd and down to the water's edge. The waves glistened gold under the afternoon sun, whispering softly as if carrying the voices of the past. Mateo took out his grandfather's faded harmonica, the one Lolo used to play after long days of fishing. He closed his eyes, inhaled the salty air and began to hum. Then, quietly, he sang, "Can't Help Falling in Love." The same song that had changed everything. Only this time it wasn't for judges or cameras. It was for his grandfather. As he sang, the villagers began to gather behind him, silently joining in. Some wept, some smiled. The ocean breeze carried his voice farther than ever before, blending with the rhythm of the waves. "Wise men say," Mateo sang, his voice steady yet tender, "only fools rush in." A tear slipped down his cheek, but he didn't wipe it away. It was a tear of peace, of love fulfilled, When he finished, there was no applause. Just the sound of the sea and the warmth of 1,000 hearts beating in unison. Weeks passed, and Matteo's story continued to ripple across the world. News outlets called him, the boy who revived Elvis. Talk shows invited him to speak. But even amid the attention, Matteo never forgot why he sang. In every interview, he spoke about his grandfather, about family, and about the kindness that had brought him from a fishing village to the AG stage. "People think I revived Elvis," he once said on a morning show, smiling humbly. "But really, I think music revived something in all of us. The belief that love never dies." Letters poured in from every corner of the globe. A widowed woman from Tennessee wrote, "I hadn't listened to Elvis since my husband passed. When I heard you sing, I cried for the first time in years. And it felt like he was sitting beside me again." A soldier overseas messaged, "Your voice reminded me of home. Thank you for giving me comfort on the hardest nights." Even Simon Cowell, known for his tough demeanor, shared a rare heartfelt post. "This boy reminded me why we do what we do. Music is more than entertainment. It's emotion, memory, and connection." Matteo is proof of that. Months later, Matteo was invited back to America, not as a contestant, but as a guest performer on the AGT finale. When he walked onto the stage again, this time wearing shoes and holding his grandfather's rosary around his neck, the crowd roared in recognition. As the music began, a large screen behind him projected black and white clips at Elvis performing in the 1960s, then slowly transitioned to scenes of Matteo singing on the island, his grandfather beside him, smiling. The two images blinded, past and present, legacy and love, and as Matteo sang the final verse, even Simon couldn't hold back tears. When the song ended, the audience stood as one. Simon walked onto the stage, placed a hand on Matteo's shoulder, and whispered into the mic, "Your grandfather would be proud. You didn't just sing Elvis's song. You reminded us that love is the most timeless thing of all." That night, back in his hotel room, Matteo stepped onto the balcony and looked at the stars. He whispered, "Did it, Lolo?" A soft breeze brushed against his cheek, and for a moment, he could swear he heard a faint harmonica tune carried by the wind. He smiled, closing his eyes, knowing his grandfather's dream and love were finally free. Months later, back home, Matteo began teaching music to children in his village. He started a small group called Songs of the Sea, where he taught them not just to sing, but to feel. To believe that no dream is too far away, no ocean too wide. Sometimes, he would still sing by the shore at sunrise, the waves echoing softly. But now when he sang, it wasn't just for one man. It was for everyone who ever believed in love, kindness, and second chances. Final message in a world filled with noise. It takes one true voice to remind us what really matters. Matteo didn't just bring Elvis back, he revived hope. He proved that love, no matter where it's born, can travel across oceans and live forever in the hearts it touches.